I didn't expect anything unusual the day I went to Lucas Miller's house. Lucas had always been predictable in the best way: movie nights, half-burnt pizza, conversations that drifted nowhere urgent. He was my friend, steady and uncomplicated, and that was exactly why I liked being around him. I was craving something familiar, something that didn't ask too much of me. When he opened the door, his smile was the same easy one I knew, but the house behind him felt louder than usual. Voices overlapped, unfamiliar laughter spilling from the living room. "Hope you don't mind," Lucas said, stepping aside. "My cousins are in town for a few days." I told him it was fine, because that's what a normal person would say. I followed him inside, already adjusting my expectations, already preparing myself to blend into the background. There were two of them. Ryan Miller was the first to introduce himself, tall, relaxed, eyes that noticed more than he let on. He shook my hand and smiled politely before turning back to whatever conversation he'd been having. The second cousin was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms folded loosely, watching us with quiet interest. "This is Noah," Lucas said. "My cousin from Oregon." Noah Miller straightened when our eyes met, and something in my chest shifted before I could stop it. He wasn't doing anything remarkable, no dramatic grin, no exaggerated confidence, but there was a calm intensity in the way he looked at me, as if he was taking his time, as if he wasn't in a rush to look away. "Ethan," I said, offering my hand. His grip was firm, warm, lingering half a second longer than necessary. "Nice to finally meet you," Noah replied, his voice low, and even that I didn't know why that sentence stayed with me. Probably because it felt deliberate, like he'd been aware of me before that moment, even though that was impossible. The evening unfolded casually. Lucas talked too much, as usual, filling the space with stories from work and jokes he'd already told me twice before. Ryan moved easily through the room, comfortable and observant. Noah stayed mostly quiet, contributing just enough to remind everyone he was listening that I caught myself watching Noah when I shouldn't have been. The way he tilted his head when he laughed. The way his attention sharpened when someone spoke about something that mattered to them. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but he didn't disappear either. He occupied the space naturally, as if the room had adjusted itself around him. It made me uneasy that I reminded myself why I was there. Lucas was my friend. Lucas trusted me. Whatever this strange awareness was, it had no place here. At some point, Lucas disappeared upstairs to grab an old game console, leaving the three of us alone. Ryan leaned back on the couch, scrolling through his phone, only half present. Noah moved to the sink, rinsing out an empty glass. "So how do you know Lucas?" he asked me, glancing over his shoulder. "College," I said. "We've been friends a long time." Noah nodded, as if that confirmed something. "He talks about you a lot." That caught me off guard. "Does he?" "Yeah," Noah said, turning fully toward me now. "You're important to him." There was no judgment in his tone, no implication, but my throat tightened anyway. I wasn't sure why the idea of Lucas talking about me, especially to Noah, made me feel exposed. Ryan glanced up from his phone, his eyes flicking briefly between us, then went back to scrolling. The moment passed, but the awareness didn't. When Lucas came back, the energy shifted again. The house filled with noise and movement, the comfort of routine reasserting itself. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something subtle had already changed. Later, as the night wore on, Lucas suggested ordering food. Ryan volunteered to pick it up. That left Noah and me standing in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. "You seem quiet," Noah said. That I shrugged. "Just tired." He studied me for a moment, not pushing, not retreating. "You don't have to explain yourself to me." Something about that, about the lack of expectation, made my guard slip. "I know," I said softly. Our eyes held, and for a brief second, the rest of the house faded. It wasn't desire exactly, not yet. It was recognition. A sense that we were seeing parts of each other we didn't usually let strangers see. Lucas's voice drifted in from the living room, breaking the moment. I stepped back instinctively, guilt flaring sharp and sudden, even though nothing had happened. Noah didn't move, didn't comment, but his expression shifted into something more careful. when Ryan returned and the night wrapped up, I said my goodbyes quickly. Lucas hugged me, unaware of the tension coiled tight in my chest. Noah watched from the doorway, his gaze steady, unreadable. As I walked to my car, I told myself I was imagining things. That it was just a harmless moment, already fading. But even as I started the engine, I knew that wasn't true, that I hadn't come looking for anything. Still, something had noticed me, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to look away. I told myself the feeling would fade once I put some distance between myself and Lucas's house. That it had been nothing more than an awkward spark born from unfamiliarity and coincidence. But over the next few days, Noah Miller kept slipping into my thoughts with a persistence that unsettled me. It wasn't his face alone that lingered, it was the way he'd looked at me, as if he'd recognized something I hadn't named yet. Lucas texted me midweek asking if I wanted to come over again on Friday. His cousins were still visiting, he added casually, like an afterthought. That I hesitated longer than necessary before replying. When I finally said yes, it felt less like a decision and more like a surrender. The second visit felt different from the moment I stepped inside. Familiar, yet charged. Lucas greeted me with the same warmth, but my attention drifted past him almost immediately. Noah was sitting on the floor by the coffee table, flipping through a photo album with Ryan. When he looked up and smiled, something settled uncomfortably deep in my chest. The evening unfolded slowly. We talked, laughed, ate, but my awareness stayed sharply attuned to Noah's presence. When he spoke, I listened. When he moved, I noticed. I hated myself a little for it, even as I made excuses I didn't believe. At some point, Lucas stepped outside to take a call. Ryan followed him shortly after, leaving Noah and me alone again, as if the house itself had conspired to create space. This keeps happening, Noah said quietly, breaking the silence. What does? I asked, though I already knew us ending up alone. He replied, his tone careful, not teasing. I don't think it's an accident. My pulse quickened. Lucas is my friend, I said, the words rehearsed, defensive. I know, Noah said. He's my cousin. There was no accusation in his voice, just acknowledgement. That somehow made it harder to hide behind excuses. We sat across from each other, the air between us dense with unspoken thoughts. Noah leaned back slightly, giving me space, and I realized then that he wasn't trying to corner me. He was waiting, letting me choose. I don't usually do this, I admitted, staring at my hands. Do what? He asked. Feel unsettled, I said. About someone I barely know. Noah nodded slowly. Sometimes the unfamiliar shows us things we've been avoiding. I looked up at him then, really looked, and saw something vulnerable beneath his calm exterior. It mirrored my own unease too closely for comfort. Over the next hour, conversation replaced silence. We talked about where we'd grown up, the lives we'd built, the quiet disappointments we rarely shared. Noah spoke about Oregon, about leaving places before they could define him. I talked about staying put, about choosing safety over curiosity more often than not. Lucas came back inside eventually, oblivious, joking about his phone call. The moment between Noah and me dissolved, but its residue clung stubbornly to my thoughts. After that night, the pattern continued. Group conversations during the day. Long, quiet exchanges when no one was paying attention. Nothing overt, nothing physical, yet something undeniably intimate began to take shape. We learned each other's rhythms, anticipated pauses, exchanged looks that carried entire conversations without words. That I started lying to myself more than anyone else. I told myself it was harmless. That emotional closeness wasn't betrayal. That as long as I didn't cross a clear line, I was still loyal to Lucas. But lines, I was learning, weren't always obvious. One afternoon, Noah found me alone on the back porch, staring at the yard without seeing it. He sat beside me, leaving a careful distance. You've been pulling away, he said. I shouldn't be doing this, I replied. Doing what? I exhaled sharply. Feeling like this. Noah was quiet for a long moment. I don't want to be something you regret. That landed harder than any confession could have. I don't regret you, I said before I could stop myself. The words hung between us, fragile and irrevocable. Noah's expression softened, but there was restraint there too, a boundary he was choosing not to cross. "We need to be honest," he said gently. "At least with ourselves." I nodded, knowing he was right, knowing honesty would demand something I wasn't ready to give. That night, lying in bed at home, Lucas's laughter echoed in my mind alongside Noah's quiet voice. The contrast made my chest ache. I realized then that something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just reacting to a feeling, I was nurturing it. That I hadn't touched Noah. I hadn't confessed anything aloud. Still, I had stepped somewhere I couldn't fully retreat from, and as I drifted into uneasy sleep, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The betrayal had already begun, even if no one else could see it yet. The shift from restraint to secrecy was so gradual that I barely noticed when it happened. One moment, Noah and I were sharing conversations that felt too personal to justify. The next, we were arranging our movements around Lucas's schedule without ever admitting that was what we were doing. It was the quiet coordination that unsettled me most, the way we both seemed to know when to linger and when to pull back. Lucas trusted me completely. That trust followed me through the house like a shadow, present even when he wasn't. I carried it with me as I laughed at his jokes, nodded through his stories, and pretended nothing inside me was changing. The effort of maintaining that version of myself was exhausting, but I didn't stop. Noah became a constant undercurrent. We didn't text often, and when we did, the messages were brief and carefully worded. Still, each one carried more meaning than it should have. A question about my day. A comment about something I'd mentioned once in passing. He remembered details, and I found myself doing the same. One evening, Lucas invited a few friends over. The house filled with noise and movement, a temporary shield against introspection. Ryan was there too, quieter than usual, his attention drifting more than his phone suggested. I noticed the way his gaze occasionally settled on Noah and me, lingering just long enough to make me uneasy. At some point, I ended up in the hallway with Noah, both of us pretending to look for something we didn't need. The sounds from the living room faded into a distant hum. "This is getting harder," I said under my breath. Noah leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. "For you or for us?" The question caught me off guard. "For everything," I admitted. He studied my face, searching for something. "You don't have to keep choosing this." I laughed quietly, though there was no humor in it. "Neither do you." "That's not the same," Noah replied. "I'm not betraying anyone." The truth of that stung. "You're not," I agreed. "I am." For a moment, I thought he might step closer. Instead, he stayed where he was, giving me space even as his words closed the distance between us. "I don't want to be a secret," he said. "And I don't want to be the reason you lose someone who matters to you." I swallowed hard. "He already matters," I said. "That's the problem." We returned to the living room separately. Lucas was in the middle of telling a story, animated and oblivious. I sat beside him, feeling the weight of my own duplicity press down on me. Noah took a seat across the room, his expression carefully neutral. Later that night, as people began to leave, Lucas volunteered to walk someone out. Ryan lingered behind, pretending to clean up. His movements were slow, deliberate. "You okay?" Ryan asked me casually, stacking empty cups. "Yeah," I said too quickly. He glanced toward the doorway Noah had just disappeared through. "You sure?" I met his gaze, searching for accusation, but found only curiosity. "Why wouldn't I be?" Ryan shrugged. "Just checking." The exchange rattled me more than any confrontation could have. It made the situation feel precarious, like something balanced on the edge of discovery. Over the following days, the tension intensified. Noah and I grew more careful, but the care itself became intimate. We chose our words precisely, our silences even more so. When our eyes met, there was an understanding there that no longer felt innocent. One afternoon, Lucas asked me if something was wrong. We were sitting in his car, the engine idling. The question dropped so casually I almost missed it. "You've been distant," he said. Did I do something? Guilt surged so sharply it stole my breath. "No," I said. It's not you. He accepted that answer with a nod, trusting me to tell him more if there was more to tell. I watched him then, really watched him, and wondered how I had allowed myself to drift so far from the person who had never once doubted me. That night, I found Noah alone on the back steps, staring into the dark yard. I sat beside him without thinking. I almost told him, I said. Noah turned to me slowly. Did you? No, a mix of relief and disappointment crossed his face. What stopped you? I considered the question. Fear, I said honestly. And selfishness. He nodded. At least you know that. We sat in silence, the space between us charged and unresolved. I felt the pull toward him, stronger now, undeniable, but also the weight of everything it threatened to unravel. I can't keep pretending this isn't happening, I said finally. Noah exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath. Neither can I. For the first time, neither of us looked away. There was no touch, no declaration, but the line we'd been skirting was now clearly behind us. Whatever came next would demand a reckoning. As I stood to go back inside, I sensed movement behind the window. Ryan was there, watching us, not intruding, not interrupting, but no longer unaware that I walked back into the house with a steady expression and a fractured resolve, knowing the quiet balance we'd maintained was about to collapse, and that there would be no way to choose who walked away unscathed. The moment everything unraveled wasn't dramatic at first. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no accusations thrown like weapons. It began quietly, the way most truths do when they've been waiting too long. Lucas noticed the change before anyone said a word. He always had. That morning, he watched me from across the kitchen, his expression thoughtful rather than suspicious. You don't stay late anymore, he said. And when you do, you're somewhere else. I froze, coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Lying felt suddenly impossible. I didn't realize it was that obvious. Lucas set his mug down carefully. I don't need obvious, he said. I just need honesty. The word settled between us, heavy and unavoidable. I thought of all the times I'd promised myself I would tell him, all the moments I'd delayed, convincing myself I was protecting him when I was really protecting myself. There's something I should have said sooner, I began. Before I could continue, Noah appeared in the doorway, having overheard just enough to understand where the conversation was headed. He stopped short when he saw Lucas's face, the tension already drawn tight. Lucas looked between us, his gaze sharpening. Is this about you? Noah didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence answered for him. Lucas's breath left him slowly, as if he were bracing for impact. How long? I closed my eyes. Longer than it should have been. What happened? Lucas asked. His voice didn't rise, but the hurt in it was unmistakable. I need to know what actually happened. I chose my words carefully, because I owed him that much. Nothing physical, I said. But something emotional. Something I didn't stop when I should have. Lucas nodded once, absorbing the truth. So you let yourself fall, he said quietly. And you let me believe everything was fine. The disappointment in his voice cut deeper than anger ever could. Noah shifted, clearly torn between staying and leaving. This wasn't your fault, Lucas said to him, surprising us both. But it's not something I can be around right now. Noah swallowed. I understand. He glanced at me then, something unspoken passing between us, regret, affection, restraint, and stepped out of the room without another word. Lucas turned back to me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I struggled to meet his eyes. Because I was afraid of losing you. Lucas gave a hollow laugh. You were losing me anyway. I just didn't know it yet. That was the moment it fully sank in. Infidelity wasn't defined by touch or timing. It was defined by choice, by every moment I'd chosen secrecy over honesty. I don't know what happens next, Lucas said after a long pause. But I know I need space. I understand, I replied, though the understanding came with a sharp ache. The days that followed were quiet and heavy. Lucas stopped reaching out. The routines we'd shared dissolved, leaving behind empty spaces I hadn't known how much I relied on. I resisted the urge to replace that loss with Noah, knowing that doing so would only repeat the same mistake. When Noah and I finally spoke again, it was outside, the evening air cool and grounding. "I never wanted this to end like that," he said. "Neither did I replied. "But it was always going to hurt someone." He nodded. "I don't regret meeting you," he said carefully. "But I don't want to be part of something that began with betrayal." The honesty stung, but it was necessary. "I need to figure out who I am without hiding," I said. "And without using someone else to do it." Noah studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "That's the right place to start." We parted without promises, without declarations. Just clarity. Weeks later, I ran into Lucas by chance. The distance between us remained, but the anger had softened into something more manageable. "I'm not ready to go back to how things were," he said. "But I don't want to pretend you don't exist either." "That's more than I deserve," I said. "Maybe," Lucas replied. "But people don't grow by pretending they didn't matter to each other." As I walked away, I understood that the story wasn't about who I chose in the end. It was about what my choices revealed, and what they cost. Some connections arrive quietly and leave loudly. Others change us simply by forcing us to face ourselves. And though the consequences lingered, so did the lesson. Desire without honesty is never harmless, and truth, once delayed, always demands its price.